Hey everyone, it's John here from CONTRABIM, and I'm excited to be back after taking a few weeks off. I actually moved both home and office, and so getting settled in here, and I'm excited to be back doing another YouTube video here on Archicad. So we recently had a question from one of our community members on how to produce quantity takeoffs for concrete formwork without actually modeling the formwork itself. So I thought this was a great question and a great exercise that we can dive into here in this video. And really the solution for this is actually going to lie within our surface-based interactive schedules. So that's what we'll be talking about today, is surface-based interactive schedules. And then we'll go through some simple examples, talk about what to be aware of, and then we'll go through and talk about this exercise for applying concrete formwork to concrete elements without actually applying any formwork at all. We're just going to be using our surfaces. So, okay, let's actually start out here with just a very basic model example, and that's just going to be a morph. This is just going to be a cube. So let's take a look at this here. And so what this is essentially just a 1 foot by 1 foot cube. So we know by looking at this, it obviously has 6 different sides. Each side in this case is going to be 1 square unit. So in this case, 1 square foot. And so we're going to start with this and take a look at how we can start extracting these takeoffs into a surface-based schedule. Now, within Archicad here, we really have 3 different types of schedules. We have elemental-based schedules, which is what I use for majority of my different takeoffs. We have component-based schedules, which are really useful for extracting out different materials within composite structures. And we have surface-based takeoffs, which is one that I use really the least, but I'm starting to find some really interesting applications for it as well. So in this case, we're going to start with just a very basic report, which is just going to essentially be an audit. So what we're going to be doing here is I've essentially set this up so that we are searching for any criteria that is or any element type that is a morph. And like most other reports within Archicad, I always like to exclude both the column segment as well as beam segments, because that can create some duplication that's not always obvious. So, so with these surface-based reports here, we actually open up some new parameters under the fields, and that's going to be relating to this surface category here of properties. So in this particular schedule, I've essentially listed all of these, including the exposed area. That's actually going to be our best takeoff parameter for our surfaces. We'll talk more about that in detail here coming up. We also have the surface color, the surface color swatch. We have this parameter here that's going to tell us whether this surface is different from the building material. So meaning that have we overridden that surface from the base material or not. We of course have the surface name, and then we also can list out the vectoral hatching name as well. So we've listed all these. I've listed also a few additional parameters here. So listed our building material ID and name. And so let's just go ahead and we will take a look at this schedule right now. We should see simply just this single morph, and there we go. So we get this nice little 3D AXO preview. We have our surface name. We have our building material ID and name. This is not currently checked, so we can tell that that is the surface from the building material. And then of course we have our exposed area, which, as we talked about before, we anticipated that to be 6 square feet in this case. You can also see the color swatch and the RGB values, as well as the vectoral hatching name. So, okay, so with this, that was pretty predictable. We knew we were going to be 6 square feet. Let's go in and make a slight adjustment here. So we're going to grab one of these surfaces here. I can do that actually by holding down Shift and Control is typically how I do that. I guess just holding Shift is not going to select the surface, but Shift plus Control and clicking will highlight that actual surface. And so now we can just, we can click on this, and we can go to our custom face settings. Now what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to apply a new surface to the clicked face that we had. So in this case, we can just go through. I'm just going to assign this to something very different, like a different type of stone, marble black in this case. And so let's hit OK. And there we go. We can now see that we have a black surface and 5 sides that are still that original. So let's go back to our report, check it out now, and we can see that now we're listing 2 different surface types from this one morph element. So we have 1 foot assigned to that stone surface marble, and we have 5 sides assigned to the basic stonework. Notice that our 3D Axo preview does not update, but we do get this little note here, this checkbox telling us that this does differ from the surface of the base material. So, okay, let's continue on with this, taking this one step further here. So, so we can actually grab this, select another face, click on that. We can assign this as something else. We'll just assign this to granite red in this case. So now we have 3 different surfaces assigned to that one face, or sorry, the one morph. There we go. We can see all 3. We can see them being listed here. And so the next thing that I want to talk about here is kind of relating to this exposed area. So we have 1, 1, and 4. What happens when we actually take this and we cover up a face? So we can take this whole morph, we can copy it up. And so now we have 2 exposed faces that are this red. We only have 1 exposed that is the black on top. We know that there's 1 sandwiched in here, but what's interesting with this is we can set up different rules that will go through and actually cover up those different faces. So this exposed area is pretty powerful, because if we have different elements on top of each other or drawn right on each other, it will actually go through and subtract those areas out. And we actually have some criteria and some rules for that here. So you'll notice under the exposed area by criteria, we can go in and set up this criteria so that we can pick and choose which element types we can use to cover up other element types. So in this case, because we are using morphs, if we actually took this and removed that morph from this, it would actually go through and it should include those areas back in. So notice that it added in that both those surfaces that, one of them was being covered before, and now we can exclude that criteria from this takeoff method, which is something that's really important to just be aware of. So if we wanted to add it back in, then we essentially just go in. We're going to add in our element type, and I'm just going to place this up in the middle here, and we're going to add that morph. And so by doing that, we added that criteria back for that element type, and so that should subtract it out once again, which it did. So, okay, so that is a quick introduction here into how we can extract exposed areas of morphs. Let's take this a little bit further now. We talked about the morph, we talked about those different exposed areas. Let's take a look at a wall in this case. So we're going to make a quick adjustment here to our audit surface settings, and we're just going to switch this over now to a wall. So we're just looking for the wall. We have all the same settings here, and so let's run this report now. Okay, so here we can see we have an exterior aluminum siding wall. We are listing our different surfaces. So we have an insulation fiberglass with studs, so that's our framing member. We have an air barrier that would be, I think, applied to our sheathing in this case, so wood sheathing plus air barrier. We have siding, and then we have our interior finish, which is gypsum board here. So we can see all of the different materials. But what's interesting with this is our exposed areas. So you notice our wood sheathing plus the air barrier, it's only a foot. And so the reason for that here is it's actually going through and just calculating the exposed area that we can see. So it's not including this overall takeoff. If we turn off our finish, it's not including all of this. It's really only including what you can see when everything is turned on. So I just want to provide this as just a little bit of a warning that these surface-based takeoffs are not always going to work in every application. In this case, we wouldn't want to be using it for these different takeoffs of these different elements here. In this case, we would actually want to do that by using our component-based takeoffs. So we check this out with an audit for our component-based takeoffs by listing that wall on the floor plan. Here we can see our skin area takeoffs are much more accurate, and that's going to be the right method for using that type of takeoff. So just wanted to point that out here. Okay, let's get into our exercise here on Formwork. So I have just a little sample modeled up here. We have some foundations. So we have a beam and column foundation. We have a cast in place column, and then we have a deck beam tying into it here. So let's start out with our foundations here. You can actually see that these are drawn where they are a little bit overlapping, which is fine. But let's just start by adding Formwork to the sides of our elements here. So in this case, obviously these are being poured into dirt, and we may or may not want to form up these, but let's assume that we do. And so, yeah, we can go and start assigning specific surfaces here so that we can really start using that surface as a way of extracting the quantities. So let's go in and let's actually assign to this here an override on our edges. So we're going to assign it to that face as well as to this face. So both sides of the beam. You can actually see that it changed our surface there. And to make this just a little bit more defined so that we can really see the values coming through, I'm actually going to go into that surface that we have set up here, which is a concrete formwork surface. I'm just going to go in and kind of browse for this custom texture that I had created. Let's see, textures, concrete formwork. So this is just like a 1x1 pattern here. And so that's going to allow us to see that just a little bit better. And we, of course, can assign our base point here so that we can really see, okay, we have 1x1 squares. So we can see we have 5 feet on this side. We have 5 feet on this side. And based off this overlapping, we know that this is not exposed in here. So we'll know that that should be excluded. So, okay, let's go in. Now that we've assigned this, let's go in and start building up this cast in place formwork takeoff. So we'll go into our scheme settings here. You can see that this is blank currently. And let's go in and let's just add in some criteria. So because we know that we just want to extract out the specific surface, we'll just add that as our base criteria and we'll assign it to concrete formwork here. So we'll start with that. And then let's go in and we will start listing those surface parameters here. So I think what I'd like to do is let's list for one our just our element type. That's always useful. We can list our element ID. That's useful as well. And then let's go list our surfaces. So we'll list our exposed area. We can do our surface color, the swatch, whether it differs from our building material, the surface name, that's fine. We can list all of these. We can also list our building material ID and name. Those are both, very useful values. And so now that we have this, let's go through. I'm going to just reorganize this just a little bit. So our element ID is going to be our top line item, our element type. Let's get our surface name moved up here to the top. We have our exposed area, the little details on that. And yeah, I'm going to pull that down to the end. Actually, no, we'll stick it right here. I'm going to have the surface differs from building materials and then our building material ID and name. So, okay, let's start with that here and run this report. Okay, so we can see we have a few things going on here. Let's actually turn on show headline. So one thing that you'll note is we have a beam segment as well as a beam coming through. So that's another case here where we would definitely want to exclude that element type. So there's two of them here we'll want to exclude. It's going to be our column segment and our our beam segment. So we'll set these two is not. And so that way we're looking for any surface that's concrete formwork and is not a column segment or a beam segment. So that should clean up this duplication here. So we'll hit OK. And all right, there we go. So let's format this just a little bit more here. I'm going to double click that, or just click that to expand it. So we can see our element type is a beam. We can see our surface. We can see our exposed area. So quick recap here. We had 5 feet on this side, 5 feet on this side. So that is a good takeoff value. 10 feet total. That's great. We can obviously go through and format the rest of these. We can see that this surface does differ from our building material. We can see what that original building material was as well. And there we go. So now we're starting to just list these, which is great. Let's continue on. Let's go back here to 3D and let's get the Formwork takeoffs working on our exterior or our perimeter of that column foundation. So we can do this through the same method. We just simply go in, we assign that concrete formwork to that surface. In this case, it's a little bit misaligned, so I'm just going to align that surface. And okay, so we have 4 sides here. We know that each side in this case is 5 feet. So if you look at this, we should have a total of 20 square feet minus whatever this little overlap is there. So if this beam is let's see, 2 feet wide, so we should be at a total of 18 square feet. Let's go and check. There we go, 18 square feet for that pad footing. And so that's extracting and cutting out that overlapping area with our beam in this case. So that's great. That's all working. Let's bring back our other elements so we can assign the same thing to our cast in place column here. So we'll assign that concrete formwork. Once again, I'm going to realign this beam. We can assign formwork to really our 3 sides. So our bottom in this case, our left and right side, and once again realign. So that should do it for all faces there. So okay, let's go back and check. We know that looking at this, looks like we have a 10-foot tall column, so it should be, 4 sides. Obviously that would be 40 square feet total minus whatever this little intersection is. And so let's check it out. So cast in place column, so 39.17, so that is subtracting out that exposed area that's covered up by the beam. We have our deck beam here, so just under 20 square feet. We have our pad footing and our tie beam. So that's how you could produce surface area takeoffs by using custom surfaces in this case. I might go back, and now that I can clearly see that we have all these surfaces set up, now would probably be time to go back and readjust that texture here. So if you wanted to have exposed surfaces here that look like they're formed, then obviously we would go in and we can switch this out for another texture. So we'll go into our texture, our surface catalog here. We can find concrete. We could probably find, actually that's probably a good one right there. That would be like a form type surface. There's probably some others here as well. That would be another one. So depending on what type of look you want to get from these, and they may vary depending on the the project and the finishes. But let's just go with one like that. That looks pretty good for the moment. So we'll assign that, and if we wanted to have it go horizontal, we can just give it a rotation of 90 degrees. And let's check it out now. Okay, so we're looking back to like a concrete form surface. Looks a little bit better for sure. And so yeah, there we go. Meanwhile, we're still producing all those quantity takeoffs, which is great. We could always mix in additional parameters here as well. So in this case, I always like using like a systems-based property or even like a cost code, but let's add in like a uniform at level 4. We can take this, drag it to the top. So column foundations, grade beams, and upper floor construction. Okay, so there we go. That is our takeoffs. Hopefully all that makes sense. Let's actually do, I think there's one more thing that I wanted to point out here, and that's actually going to be kind of an extension of what we had talked about before. I'm going to take this wall, I'm going to assign it to draw by the inside face, and let's do this. Let's just draw a wall around our project here. Let's assume like this is like a corner condition. And so now that we've drawn this wall, let's take this, I'm going to make it 10 feet tall as well. Let's just check this area out. So this would be kind of a real application where we would have that column in here being covered up. It'd look something like that. But let's go back now, and I want to check the takeoff value on this column in particular. Because we have these walls drawn directly on them. Let's check it out now and see where we're at. So, okay, our column, we are still currently at that 39.17. So it looks like that is still calculating. Let's go into our scheme settings here and just kind of double check and see. So, you know, one thing that I notice here, and I think this actually, I think it actually removed it from before. I know I had wall at the top of that list before. So if we leave that in, that's just something to be aware of in this case. So let's see, let's go back and recalculate this. So cast in place formwork. So our cast in place column 39.14. So it doesn't seem like that is excluding it, which is actually what we want. Oh, element type is let's wrap all this up. I think we should be able to get that to be excluded, but let's just double check here. Okay, yeah, so now we can see that this is actually cutting out the surface area where those walls are touching that column in this case, which is obviously going to be along pretty much both these faces here. If we take these, we adjust them down, it should subtract it even more. So yeah, we get into like 19.17 for that exposed area. But obviously in this case, to form this, in this particular example, obviously we're not using those walls to form it, so we're going to need to form that whole surface. And so that would be the application here where we would need to go in and we would need to exclude that wall. So now we're still leaving the rest of these. You may find that in certain cases you need to go through and exclude other parts and pieces. Like if you had a curtain wall drawn on the face of that column, then we'd probably want to exclude that as well. So just something to be aware of, that there may be times you need to exclude particular wall types from that criteria. So, okay, I'm actually interested here. If we go back to our audit for our surfaces, we can see all the different walls here. I'm actually just interested to see if this is a global thing or if it's by schedule. So, okay, so it is by schedule. We can see the wall is included in this particular report, but it is excluded from our formwork based report. So that's good. That's what I wanted to double check to make sure that that is going to be excluded there. So, okay, there we go. That is pretty much everything that I wanted to cover here in this example. Hopefully this provides some good insight into how you can set up some different surface-based takeoffs. Obviously for formwork here, it works just really nicely just to go through and apply it. But there's a number of other applications for surfaces as well. So yeah, hopefully you learned a few little tips and tricks from this video. If you like this type of content, then obviously make sure to subscribe to this channel so you get all the notifications. We have a lot of videos that we want to do here over the next few weeks, so you'll see a lot more in terms of tutorials coming out. Once again, we've taken the last few weeks off as we went through the move, but excited to be back and back here with you on YouTube. And yeah, we'll catch you here on another video soon. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments section, and we'll catch you on another video coming up here early next week. We'll have several new tutorials coming out, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, thanks for watching.